This video is concerned with operations management, and in particular we're going to look at planning and the role of planning within operations management. Planning is simply the process of deciding what to do. It's having a plan, it's having a framework that's going to guide us into the future. It attempts to answer the following questions. What should the firm do? What are its goals and what are its objectives? Now sometimes the goals and objectives are set down by senior management, and these may be in the strategic plan. But there's also operational planning. How should the operations managers cope with the requirements of the strategic plan? How should they increase capacity? How should they lay out the plant? How should they organize the stores? So what should the firm do? What are its goals and objectives? When must the firm meet the goals? Set out milestones and due dates. It's important to have a plan that's going to be implemented and worked and monitored. And the most effective way of monitoring the plan is by having milestones, that by a certain date, certain processes should have been completed. If they're not completed, then an inquiry into why they're not completed can be initiated and perhaps procedures changed as a consequence. Allocate responsibilities for the various required tasks. It's important that there is delegation. A team is set up to look at the plan, and there is delegation, each member of the team having certain responsibilities, and they can report back on their findings. It shouldn't fall to just one person, obviously, to implement a plan, design an operations plan and implement it. Depending on the scale of the operation, that may not be practical. If it's a large organization, then clearly one person could not do it. So there should be responsibilities given to members of a team to monitor different aspects of the plan. How should the output be produced? Look at the technology that's required and the plans of action that are needed in order to get production moving. How should the items be booked from the stores? If it's raw materials that's going to be processed, how should they be booked out of the stores? How should they be transported to the machine? How should the machine be set? And there are many detailed procedures to be accounted for, and these need to be planned and worked out in advance so that there is no ambiguity and there are no issues to be resolved. There is a smooth, continuous production as a consequence of the detailed plans. Determine techniques for measuring performance and setting standards and looking at benchmarks. It's important that there are some measures of performance. Measuring performance is notoriously difficult. If a worker seems to become more productive, is it the workers that's becoming more productive, or the machine the worker is using that's becoming more productive? So it's very difficult to isolate out particular changes and account for the changes. However, that should not put off management from trying to measure performance. Try to see whether the organization is running more efficiently, and also set standards and benchmarks and try to achieve them. Set the ones that can be identified easily, and that when they're achieved, it should be obvious that they've been achieved and the box is ticked in a sense, and the management can then move on to the next benchmark. But it's important that performance should be measured if possible. It's notoriously difficult, as I said. Planning is forward-looking. Operational plans relate to a short planning horizon and are generally very detailed. So operational plans are different from strategic. Strategic plans are issued by top management who want to see where the organization will be perhaps in the next 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. And it may have it may deal with issues like globalization and relocation of plant and diversification, introducing new products and talking about the different technologies and so on. It's long run. It's almost aspirational. Whereas operational planning or operations planning is much more detailed. It's short run. It looks maybe over a 1 month period or over 6 months period. It could even stretch into a year, but it wouldn't go much beyond a year. It tends to be short run, and it's also very detailed. It says exactly what's going to happen and how it's going to happen, and it gives details. So it's much more here and now than strategic planning, which is long run, looking way into the future. So there is a difference between operational and strategic that we must be aware of. As I said, the operational plan tends to be very detailed, and that's important to bear in mind. The process of making it's a process of making sense of data. Data is often poorly structured, incomplete, inconsistent, inaccurate, and also available sometimes in large quantities. But data is not useful. Data is just data. It's just facts, perhaps. It could be numbers. It's when we transform the data into information that it becomes useful. And we do that through some techniques, some way of doing it, some maybe computer program or some method of analysis or discussion or interpreting the data in a particular way. So it's moving the data towards information that's important. So analysis supporting planning by providing the facts is a useful format. And data is important. It's important to collect data and then analyze it, turn it into information. The information can shed light on plans, on operations plans to see if they're workable, if they're practical, if there are issues. Perhaps the data is picked up from interviewing personnel working on the shop floor who have built up expertise over perhaps working there for a long time. And talking to them may be a valuable source of information, valuable source of data, which is then processed into information, I should say. But then that could be fed back into better practice on the shop floor, more efficient practice, safer practice, more interesting practice of how the jobs are conducted. Analysis also facilitates management's control of activities by providing a basis for corrective action. When things can go wrong, then it's important to have plans that can step in to stop what is going wrong and fix it, bring it back into smooth running and appropriate running. So when some procedure is failing or about to fail, there should be some means of picking this up and intervening to fix it. So analysis is very important in this. Getting data, having monitoring tools which will flag up that something's about to go wrong or something has gone wrong, or and having some remedial action prepared and ready to step in to fix the issue. So in other words, if something is going to go wrong, management have anticipated it and have solutions ready to implement so as to minimize the impact of the failure. Organizing is another part of operations management. The process of building organization structures and interrelated task coordination teams. Now it may sound complex, but essentially organizations need to have structures and they need to develop the structures. It's not as if plants, factories, offices are designed once and they're going to last like that forever. The requirements of the space may change. The requirements may change because of changing technology. So there may be external influences that are changing the way in which space is used. The organization is changing. The organization structures may change. The way operations management sets out the detailed structure on the shop floor, who's in charge and who's reporting to who, that may change. It may change as the technology changes, as the products change, as new designs are introduced. So all the time organizations are, in a sense, mutating towards something different. And sometimes companies have teams that are dedicated to looking at coordination problems and trying to ensure that the organization is running smoothly. The teams may be very informal. It could be just people from the shop floor who meet once a week for an hour and discuss issues and what went wrong and how it could be improved and make some feedback. In the past, organizing dealt mostly with humans, but increasingly it involves data gathering. So in the past, management would talk to the workers and talk to middle management and so on and try and feel what was happening. That still happens, but increasingly they're trying to find data. They're trying to find facts and figures which can be analyzed. Asking people's opinions can be very vague and can also be contradictory, and it can be difficult to interpret. What exactly did they mean? But if facts and figures are collected and data is collected, perhaps through observation or through accurate record keeping or putting somebody on the shop floor if it's a shop floor issue and monitoring the situation and making notes about it, that's much more reliable. It's always important to find the right person who's going to do the data collecting, who has got the skills, who understands the issues. What information is going to be collected? There's a lot of data produced in companies, in the offices, on the shop floor, in logistics. There's a lot of data produced, and it's sorting out what exactly is the right data. What data should be collected and then processed, and how should it be processed into the right information. Information that's reliable and that management can use for decision-making purposes. So the data should be in the right form. Let's say they want to work out average production times. Well, it needs to be in quantitative terms. So the data must be in the right form. So it depends critically on what is being analysed. So trying to get the right information in the right form. It's also a question of getting it at the right time. Is this a continuous process? Is it something that happens on a continuous basis, or is it a once-off, or is it a once-a-week activity when data is collected? What are the sources of the data, and how often can they be collected? How much data is involved? And is it arduous to collect it? Is it difficult to collect this data? So it has to be at the right time, right form, right information, collected by the right person. These factors are key in the success of an organization's design. It's important that the organization have this information before they set out precisely how production will take place, how personnel will be allocated, the logistics in terms of distribution, and even the internal logistics, in a sense, the moving the materials from stores to machines, and how the office links and the office functions link with the shop floor. Directing and implementing plans. Well, The process of directing and implementing plans requires management to expand resources to perform the tasks defined by the planning process. So it's a question of making sure that the management have the resources to undertake the tasks that are required by the planning process. So the planning process, it must have a rationale. What's it trying to do? Is it just a planning process for the sake of it, or is it trying to bring about more efficiency, greater utilization of capital, better HR practices? What is it doing exactly? And what are the benefits of the planning process? And then those benefits have to be compared with the resources used as a part of the planning process. So there should be a net benefit from the planning process. The controlling function involves critically assessing the plans and the effectiveness of their implementation. So when the plans have been designed and the information collected, then it's important that the information is acted upon. Otherwise, it's all an empty gesture. Or otherwise, it's just a pure cost. Data was collected and processed into information, analysed, discussed, looked at in the context of the plan, and then nothing happens. Well, that would be silly. That's just a whole waste of time. So it's important that there is effective implementation, that recommendations come out of the exercise, and the recommendations are discussed and evaluated, and that after a process of reflection and thinking on the part of management and seeking advice from perhaps experts and consultants and talking to people on the shop floor, wide consultation, then implement. Did the plans meet the stated goals? Were the plans, were they precise enough to meet the goals of the organisation? What are the strategic goals of the organisation, the long-term ones, and how do the operational plans facilitate those? Are they pointing in the same direction? Are they supporting each other? Was the analysis useful refining the planning process? Was it useful in the refining process? Was the analysis effective? Was there a sufficient amount of analysis? Were enough people asked? Was expert opinion sought? And then, if there were, what was the outcome? Was there unanimity on the part of the participants? Did they agree that that's what the data was suggesting? And if they did, then there's more trust and reliability seen in the data. There's more confidence that what was found should be implemented. Was the controlling function effective? Once the plans have been worked out and analysed and consulted, and once agreement is reached and they were implemented, were they controlled? Were they just implemented and left? Because that again would be a recipe for failure. So they need to be implemented and then acted upon. They need to be controlled. So we can identify 10 critical decisions. What's the product design? What's the service design? What exactly is the product? What does the customer see or experience in terms of the product? Look at quality management to make sure the product is good quality and that there is good value for money and the customer experience is positive. Make sure that the capacity of the organisation to produce the product or the service is in place. Make sure the capacity has been thought about and it's also well designed. Look at the location of the business, and also look at the location of the various functions within the business. This spatial recognition or spatial awareness is very important in business to make sure that efficiency is facilitated, and it's facilitated through location. Look at the layout of the business. Where are the people located within the business? Where are the different offices? How easy is it for them to communicate and to speak to each other face to face? And how accessible are they to the shop floor management who need information perhaps on an occasional basis? How easy is it for them to get that? And also look at the overall design of the business in terms of health and safety and access and so on. Look at the human resource. Look at job designs to make sure that the jobs are not too narrow and too focused and hence extremely specialized and almost dehumanizing. Try to introduce job enrichment if possible and engage with the workers and empathize with them. They're there to earn a living. They're there to make a contribution. Look at the supply chain issues, how suppliers make deliveries and what's the contact with the suppliers, and is it possible to interrogate the suppliers' database to see what they've got in stock and what they're expecting and when the deliveries can be made, and try to see if the supply chain management can somehow facilitate a just-in-time policy or at least facilitate a more efficient production routine and scheduling than perhaps happens at the moment. So look at supply chain management and see how that can be used. Look at inventory management. As I said before, stocks held in the stores, raw materials, components, semi-completed goods, these are in a sense a deadweight loss. They're just sitting there. And insofar as they are just sitting there, they are not adding to the value of the business. So it's important that inventory management is looked at carefully. It's also important, depending on the production system used, batch production, just in time, whatever it is, it's also important to make sure that the inventory is sufficient, that it's not going to lead to a stock out and machines have to be turned off and workers have to stand around waiting. That should be avoided. That's the other side of the coin, and that is also extremely expensive. So there's a balancing act. Make sure that the inventories are not excessive, but on the other hand, there is no possibility of a stock out. Look at scheduling, scheduling production, to make sure there's a logic in the way it's scheduled, and make sure that once it's scheduled and goes on to a production system, that it's progressed, that management know exactly where it is, what's happening to it, workers are familiar with the various processes and it runs smoothly through the various parts. And make sure also, as part of scheduling, that machines are are maintained on a scheduled basis. So scheduling is important. Finally, maintenance. Make sure that the machines are maintained. As I said, in terms of scheduling, make sure that the machines are maintained on a scheduled basis. But also look at maintenance. Maintenance of the building, maintenance of equipment, the different versions of the product that are made, the different tools that are made. Make sure that they're maintained. Tools perhaps for lathes or milling machines or drilling machines or whatever it is. Make sure that they are well maintained, and also versions of software used in the office and so on. And so make sure that the production facility does not get out of date or does not encounter problems and break down, because again, that's a waste of resources. So these are 10 critical decisions that need to be borne in mind by operations management. And that's all I'm going to do in this video, so I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.